This is a Squiz podcast. We're your shortcut to being informed. The weekly wrap is the week in news and what's coming up. I'm Kate Watson.
And I'm Claire Kimball.
There's obviously, Claire, no way that Cyclone Alfred is not the biggest story this week, so we'll get into that. We'll get you across some of the issues hanging off it, things like the science, insurance, the historical context. It's some things that might be helpful in your conversations about it over the weekend. There's also an update on Trump v Zelensky.
There is. We left that on a cliffhanger last week, Andrew and I, so a bit to catch up with there. There's also some good economic news this week.
Yeah, I think we need some positive vibes. A retail sensation that's in trouble as well, Panda Mart, if you haven't heard of it. And recommendations, as always. I'm seeing in the little script we do here a recipe.
We'll get into it. It's exciting. I'm excited.
Talking of a cliffhanger. Before we get into it, this episode is brought to you by HubSpot. With HubSpot, marketing has never been easier. Create content fast, get better leads, and nail your reporting all in one place. Visit HubSpot.com/marketers to see how companies like yours are generating 110% more leads in just 12 months. Claire, we thought about talking about the Oscars off the top of the podcast. We thought there was a bit to say about that, the dresses, the fashion, the films that were popular, although you and Andrew did talk about that a little bit last week.
A little bit. Let's just say if I was weekly wrapping or you were weekly wrapping with Andrew, this would be a very different podcast, I think.
Because we're not going to talk about the
Forget
Oscars.
Cyclone Alfred. I think he would just want to do it on the Oscars.
True.
He goes deep, of course. But after all of that, we're not going to talk about that. It was one of the biggest news stories of the week, but I've got something chicken related.
So you started telling a story in our production meeting about a chicken in your neighbourhood. My eyes glazed over. So this is actually me hearing it for the first time. Or my ears glazed over? I don't know, one or the other.
And look, it's not just my neighbourhood. I live here close to where our office and studio is. It's where we work, so you should be interested in what's happening in our local community.
Okay.
If you're not Sydney literate, we're in Potts Point. So it's just east of the city centre. It's very close to the CBD, and about 200 metres from us, it merges into King's Cross. So it's very urban, a lot of history in this area. Like a lot of communities, we have a Facebook group, and this week it's been going off about a rogue chicken.
Just running the streets.
Running the streets, sightings, lots of pictures at the backside of the chicken as it's running off. And this week it got caught by the King's Cross police. They posted an update to Facebook. Cue some really excellent comments from those spectators who have been following it very closely. Let us know if you need help cracking the case. The Northern Territory Police chipped in. I thought that was quite funny.
Someone from the NT.
Well, the NT Police.
Wow.
Yeah, the whole police of the Northern Territory. Also, one local, arrest real criminals, stop dealing with such paltry matters. I thought that was good.
Oh, you did enjoy that.
Yeah.
But we really need to get into the news. But does it belong to someone? Is it? I mean, I kind of thought, is it from a restaurant? Was it destined for? I don't know.
I don't think a restaurant is in the line of sight. Probably more a school locally.
Oh, okay.
That
Who
might
lost
have a
their
little
chicken?
yeah. Apparently
Okay.
down in Darlinghurst, which is just across the road, they've got some chickens at the primary school.
There you go.
Who knows?
If you want to join that Facebook group, Claire will put a link in the show notes. But let us get into Alfred because, of course, that is far and away the biggest story of the week. And that's about as light as it gets, as I'm sure we don't need to tell anyone in southeast Queensland or northern New South Wales right now. This storm is a real worry.
Yeah, and as we're recording on Friday morning, it hasn't reached the coast yet, but already we've seen how crazy the surf is. Plenty without power already as we speak.
28,000 homes, I think. It's supposed to make landfall on Saturday. So today, if you're listening on Saturday, Queensland isn't a stranger to cyclones, but this part of Queensland, the major population centre of Queensland, is.
Yeah, and look, I know cyclones aren't sentient, they don't have feelings, but it was hard not to think that it's really targeting Brisbane, the Sunshine Coast, the Gold Coast, those northern rivers communities over the border there in New South Wales. There's about 4 million people who live in that zone that they expect will be affected by this.
Yeah, and like everyone, we can't keep up with the updates, the ins and outs of what's happening where. But there are some big news themes around this event, starting with the precedent for a storm like this.
Yeah, and as we touched on above, it's rare but not unprecedented. The last tropical cyclone to hit southeast Queensland, that was Cyclone Zoe. It crossed over Coolangatta in 1974. Now, a lot of development has happened since 1974, so it will have a very different impact this time around. Cyclone Zoe came just 2 months after Cyclone Wanda, which caused the really big catastrophic Brisbane floods in 1974. That's usually the benchmark that Brisbane talks about when it comes to floods, that 74 flood. When you look at northern New South Wales, Cyclone Nancy brushed the coast near Byron Bay in 1990. I think I remember that. You wouldn't because you were only like 2 years old, but I certainly remember when that happened.
I don't. I don't, of course. There are others, but those were the most recent. And we're talking about cyclones, not big flooding events, but cyclones. To the science of this one, it's been a week for meteorologists. It's really been their week. The amount of explainers I've seen and read. Broadly, though, Claire, important to note this is a tropical cyclone. So tropical cyclones spin clockwise in the southern hemisphere and anti-clockwise in the northern hemisphere.
Yeah, right.
I know, which I thought was just,
Okay.
interesting.
It's kind of like water going down the drain.
Yeah, exactly the same
gotcha.
thing, I think.
Let's run with it.
That's the same thing. They're sometimes referred to as typhoons or hurricanes in other parts of the world. So if you're making comparisons, those are other words for a cyclone. They need a sea surface temperature of at least 26 degrees. They draw their energy from the water, meaning they tend to die off once they reach land. It's less the cyclone itself that's the problem when it reaches land and more what it generates that's the problem.
Yeah, so you would have already heard a lot about the category being 1, 2, or 3. That's been going up from 1 to 2, back to 1, all of that this week. It's not really the point. So the Bureau of Meteorology has talked about quite extensively that category. It's not a really good read about the severity when it comes to things like surf conditions or flooding.
It's about the wind, not about how much water's coming or what the surf might do. And we've seen like those images coming from that part of the world of the surf just battering the coast and conversations around erosion and potentially permanent erosion.
Surfers, you would have seen pictures of surfers out there with jet skis.
Wild.
People walking along the coast have to be really careful.
Bit of talk about the tide too. So if you've read the news this week, if it hits at high tide, they're really concerned because the flooding and erosion will be worse than if it was at low tide. Worth noting, just on that point, that the highest tides are around 3:30 a.m. in the morning at the moment on the Gold Coast and Sunshine Coast, a bit later in Brisbane across the weekend. The other part of this conversation, Claire, has been about insurance, the damage bill.
Yeah, so Federal Treasurer Jim Chalmers, he's a Brisbane guy. That's where he lives, his community is. You would have seen pictures of him filling sandbags this week. Every time I looked at the TV, it seemed to be Jim Chalmers filling up a sandbag.
Oh, I actually didn't.
Yeah, no, I saw lots of that this week. He said on Thursday that the government was anticipating billions and billions of dollars worth of damage. The thing about this is that some of the communities affected have only just recovered from flooding events from 2022.
I can't imagine the anxiety those people are feeling. One town in particular focus is actually not in Queensland, but Lismore. That's in northern New South Wales. It was only in 2022 that Lismore and that Northern Rivers region was devastated by record flooding in many parts. There are evacuation warnings in place there already. People have evacuated. You were talking to me particularly around that. It's 3 years on from that event, but particularly around the fact that people are only just getting keys back to homes. Talk to me about that a little bit.
Yeah, Andrew Hall is the head of the Insurance Council of Australia. He's a good mate of ours and the Squizzes, and he's also a King's Cross local. He's just down the road as we talked.
Is he on their Facebook group?
He's on Potts Pointers, that's for sure. What he was talking about when I ran into him was that as part of that task force that's looked at the reconstruction of Lismore, he's been deeply involved in that with the local council and state government and others. There were ceremonies last week handing back keys to homeowners in some low-lying areas. The question that he's been talking about, not just to me, but on TV, you might have seen him pop up, is how many times can we build these homes in these zones and then have to do it again in 3 and 6 years' time. It's a real question that comes out of all of this.
Lismore in particular is at the junction of two rivers and is very prone to flooding. So no doubt, as I said, that'll be an ongoing conversation once we get through this event. Looking at the local newspaper there, the mayor has said how hard it is for the community to have to deal with this again. And this is the quote. He said, "It's heartbreaking to be honest, but one thing I can say I'm extremely proud of is to see early preparation and people who are much better off right now than we were in 2022. And that is heartening. We have seen plenty of time for people to prepare."
Like a week and a bit.
A week and a bit, yeah.
And just to round this out, one of the themes of these big natural disasters around the world has been the importance of getting information from credible sources. Some of the images that you'll see on TikTok and other social platforms, they just aren't real. Many are, but many aren't.
Some of the ones that are real seem unreal, but it is a good shout because one of the big themes is making sure you do get accurate information. I did see reports of scam texts about power outages, for example, so it's worth a shout to just put a critical eye on everything that you're seeing. A message now from HubSpot. When all your marketing team does is put out fires, you burn out fast. But with Breeze, HubSpot's suite of AI tools, you can get results without the stress. It means you can capture audience attention, access all your data from one place, and see how easy it is to get 110% more leads in just 12 months. Visit hubspot.com/marketers to learn more. 3 other news stories to get you across this week. Last week, when you published Weekly Wrap, you were at the as you said, there was a cliffhanger around Zelensky and Trump, a meeting. Little did we expect it to be the meeting that it was.
The cliffhanger was that there was a deal that was being discussed that would transfer about $500 billion worth of Ukraine's mineral wealth to the United States. They'd develop all these mineral assets together. And Zelensky was heading to the United States to have a chat to Donald Trump about it, because the big question mark was, well, if we do that deal, what sort of security assurances can you give us? They had that meeting, woke up Saturday morning and it had just all happened. And wow, fireworks. It was really uncomfortable.
Watching it was uncomfortable. Watching the end of it, in particular, because JD Vance was in that meeting, watching the end of it where he sort of chimed in and started sort of
added to his boss's case.
Yeah, maybe that's the way to put it.
Wanted to make a point.
Yeah, wanted to make a point. Was it incredibly uncomfortable to watch? It's kind of like that really cringy, this is awkward.
And the thing about it too, like that's the performative part of those meetings. So they invite the press in. You know, usually they're sitting there with the fireplace behind them, the president and the other world leader, and they shake hands and sort of talk generally about the things that they're going to get across. And then they head off to a private room and really hash it all out. They hashed it all out in front of the media.
In front of the media.
And Zelensky was then asked to leave when it all went off track. He was told that he wasn't thankful enough. There was lots of reporting about Trump and Vance feeling disrespected that he wasn't dressed appropriately. All sorts of things going on there. Really, really ugly.
We know you care about it too, because the most clicked link out of the Squiz Today newsletter, which is read by about 60,000 of you, is usually something light, fun, maybe a chicken story, maybe something about the Oscars, a red carpet gallery. The most clicked link out of our newsletter this week was the image of Ukraine's ambassador to the US sitting there with her head in her hands when things went off track. So a lot of engagement with this story. To pick up what happened next and where things are currently, Zelensky went from Washington to London quite quickly. He's gone around the world this week, where he met with PM Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister there, and King Charles. Lots of pictures of solidarity.
Very much the opposite, that's for sure, and backed with an announcement of financial support from the UK to Ukraine. What they announced was a 4.6 billion Australian dollars loan that would be paid through liquidated Russian assets. Remember, of course, when this all happened, countries around the world, particularly countries like the UK, froze the assets that are held in their country by Russian oligarchs or businesses. So they've frozen those assets and now they're selling them off. So how that fund to Ukraine will be paid is through the sale of Russian assets.
What sort of assets are we talking about?
Oh, yachts, apartments, real estate,
Right.
business assets, all sorts of things.
I did write a note in the script here. I don't know what this means. Liquidated assets to me, I'm like, what? Like, what sort of stuff?
If you're in the market for a mega yacht, now is a really good time because lots of those seized yachts are now being put at auction. So away you go. Starmer is sort of one to clock, I think, in all of this. Recent weeks, he's really emerged as a leading player when it comes to the international response to America's changed position under Donald Trump. And one commentator I saw called him no drama Starmer. He's staying really calm.
Yeah, even Trump praised him for his beautiful accent when they met recently. It's a very Trump compliment. There were others in Zelensky's corner, of course, of two. He and Starmer joined the leaders of France, Germany and Poland, the heads of the European Commission and European Council, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and NATO's Secretary General as well. They met, said they would form a coalition of the willing to present a Ukraine peace plan to Trump.
Yeah, and there's no details about what that plan actually looks like, but it does seem, to go to Trump's really central point in all of this. He wants the war to end. Parts of his blow up with Zelensky is about why should it continue to fund the fight if Zelensky just isn't in a position to negotiate peace? And Trump is sort of willing to negotiate that with Russia on terms that might not favour Ukraine or Western European leaders. So there's now a real focus about what does peace look like.
And Trump did say he would be a disruptor.
Yes.
So this is sort of not super unexpected.
You're one in my life who keeps saying, well, what do you expect Trump to do? Like, he's the guy that blows things up. This is what he does.
He kind of told us he would do this, but yeah, the call out has been very real. The US has paused not only the flow of military hardware, he isn't just saying these things, he's doing this now, and financial support to Ukraine. Also intelligence gathering that has helped Ukraine's forces anticipate and block incoming missile and drone attacks and their ability to effectively target Russia's invading forces. As we get to the end of the week, though, where we're at right now, Zelensky said he's ready to sign this minerals deal.
Yep, and he also said that they stand ready to work under President Trump's strong leadership to get a peace that lasts. So it's galloped along this week, this conversation.
Still to be continued, very much so,
yeah.
though. The other story, when we talked about what we needed to cover this week, as we said in our headlines, there was a good economic story to tell this week. So let's tell it.
Yep, let's do that. So specifically, we want squizzes to know that you're no longer in a per capita recession.
Okay.
So well done to us.
Well done to us. What does that mean?
Remember a few weeks ago we bought a steel making factory in Whyalla? Congratulations. This is the other bit of news to clock. We're going to be doing better, apparently, on an individual basis.
Please.
So for the last couple of years, Australians have actually seen their individual economic position go backwards, according to the official data. When you put that in simpler terms, our standard of living has been in decline. But the big update this week shows that ended in December.
That was from our national accounts. That's a proper noun. That's the name of the organisation, I guess, that does these things.
No, that's the data set.
Oh, that's the data. Is it a proper noun?
The national accounts. Oh, yeah, they're a thing. Yeah.
Okay, the national accounts. That's data as you go on to inform me in our written script. It tallies up Australia's economic activity, tells us we're growing or in decline. The top line is Australia's economy grew by 1.3% throughout the year.
The target is 2% for this financial year. We've been below 1% for quite a bit. So to head above 1% is good, but we need to target 2% for this financial year. The good news is that the experts reckon that our economy is making progress towards the goal of rebalancing all of the ugly stuff that happened from COVID, that we're starting to actually rein in inflation and get our economy back on the right footing with wages growth, employment doing well, and inflation being kept in check. So that's good.
And there's politics around this. So obviously We are going to have an election very, very soon. We say this every single weekly wrap. And the cost of living will be a big issue in the campaign. These are numbers that will be something the Albanese government will point to when they talk about their handling of the economy. They'll say they've steered us out of a very difficult time.
Yeah, and the reason to clock the national accounts is these are the numbers.
Yeah.
If you're going to point to some numbers when they say we're getting the economy back on track, these are the numbers that they are pointing to. The coalition, though, of course, will say that it's taken way too long and that per capita recession, Australians have gone backwards during the Albanese government's time in government.
So while we're improving, we've still gone backwards.
They will say, the coalition will say that's the thing that Australians are most concerned about.
Lots of speculation in the media about when the Prime Minister will call an election. Everyone thought it would be this weekend, but of course that may be difficult given we've got a cyclone heading for parts of the country.
Yeah, exactly right. The latest he could call an election for a 12th April election would be Monday because it has to be a 33-day campaign. The reason to do it on the 12th of April and to call it this weekend is that they will miss having to do the budget.
So if he doesn't call it by 5 o'clock on Monday, he has to have a budget.
Exactly right, which is scheduled for the 25th of March.
I can hear a collective who cares about the election from anyone affected by this natural disaster, but the media's obsession with this is undeniable.
Well, you've still got, tens of journalists in the Canberra Press Gallery who this is the main game.
This is
their cyclone.
So it is, well, and then we could go, the cyclone was going to be called Anthony.
Oh, was it?
Did you see that?
No.
Oh, yeah. So the Bureau has
a whole roster of names.
They have a roster of names and they were due
female and then male.
Yeah, but they were up to Cyclone Anthony. And that was supposed to be the name of Cyclone Alfred.
That's really
But then
funny.
they stepped in the bomb and said it would be too confusing with the Prime Minister's name being Anthony. So it was Alfred. But it was supposed to be called Anthony.
There you go.
Can you imagine the headlines, the field day people would have had with that? To finish up, a story that we discovered through our monitoring of Google Trends data, Panda Mart, Claire. Both you and I drew blank.
Never heard of it.
Never heard of Panda Mart.
But hundreds of thousands of Google searches on it this week.
It's huge. So it opened its first store in Victoria, in Cranbourne, last week. It was forced to close early on Saturday after police were called to control crowds. This is why we went, okay, what's Panda
So
Mart?
many questions.
Yeah.
So it's not a place to buy your first panda. I learned that, which I'm a bit disappointed about.
Shame for you.
However, it's a family-run business from South Africa. I thought just instinctively that it was potentially Chinese, given the panda name. It's got more than 100 stores globally. They have their own factories in China and they also source from other manufacturers there, but they're on the ground in China actually sourcing product. It's said to basically be an in-store version of Temu.
Heaps and heaps of stock, more than 53,000 different types of products. We're talking homewares, sporting goods, beauty products, knockoff Crocs for $7. It's super, super cheap. It aims to be about 33% cheaper than stores like Kmart, which is already very inexpensive.
They're our discount retailers for sure.
Yeah, we were talking about the economy and cost of living. There were more than 1,000 people lined up to get into that store in Melbourne after its opening.
And that's not the only reason it was in the news. A little bit later in the week, Consumer Affairs Victoria sent their inspectors in and they seized thousands of products that they believe failed to meet the mandatory product safety and information standards. That included products that they deemed to be dangerous.
One issue to call out was button batteries. They seized toys, baby rattles containing those button batteries. Any parent will know they're super, super dangerous.
Tell me this, you're a mum
Yeah.
of young children. Why do rattles have batteries?
I don't have a rattle.
Yeah.
Couldn't tell you. I'm
Them.
sure there's a rattle
Yeah.
with a button battery, but
Well, there shouldn't be because
Yeah.
they're not safe.
yeah, if you ingest one of those, they can cause internal burns, severe bleeding or death. There are big fines for retailers that don't meet these standards.
Really, really big fines for that sort of stuff. Australia has excellent product safety standards and actually enforces it really strictly. So, yeah, that's a whole thing. Panda Mart Australia's owner is John Chen. What he says is, we will hire a proper professional, someone who is in the industry, to check our stock in future.
Sounds like a good idea. A message now from HubSpot. When all your marketing team does is put out fires, you burn out fast. But with Breeze, HubSpot's suite of AI tools, You can get results without the stress. It means you can capture audience attention, access all your data from one place, and see how easy it is to get 110% more leads in just 12 months. Visit hubspot.com/marketers to learn more. Let's get into what's coming up for the week ahead. Today is our birthday, Claire.
It's our birthday. We're 8.
We're 8.
If you can believe it. I remember it so well, hitting the send button on our very first newsletter back in 2017. Here we are in 2025. It's so cool.
It's great that we are still here 8 years on and growing, actually. Yeah. We've recorded a podcast with Andrew Williams from The Squiz today to talk about exactly what we've done across the last 8 years, but also what we've got planned in the future. He sort of interviews the two of us.
Yeah.
That's out on the Squiz Today feed if you want to have a listen. We're not really good at looking backwards.
No. Want to move forwards. It's the reason why we don't celebrate any wins either. Like, you're lucky to get a cup of tea if something goes well.
Yeah, true. We actually have nothing planned to celebrate 8 years except releasing a podcast, which seems appropriate, so that's fine. Also today, though, and perhaps more importantly, the Western Australian election.
Yeah, so the Labor Party absolutely decimated the Liberals in 2021. We'll see how Premier Roger Cook goes. It's his first election as the leader of the Labor Party. And we'll also see whether the Liberals and the Nationals can peel back any seats from them.
I had forgotten what a decimation that was.
Yeah.
The Liberals only won 2 seats of 59. The Nationals won 4. So they're effectively the opposition.
The Nationals have been leading the opposition.
It's just,
It was huge.
It was huge. And we'll see a lot of commentary about what it might mean for the federal election as well once we know what the results are. For cricket fans, on Sunday, 8 p.m. is the ICC Champions Trophy final between India and New Zealand. Not Australia.
Not Australia.
Let's move on.
Yeah.
Moomba is in full swing. What's Moomba?
Moomba is Melbourne's longest running and largest community festival.
Yeah.
Back in the day, being the king or queen of Moomba was a really big deal. There's a big festival as well that happens on Monday. I wanted to call out the Birdman rally.
Yeah, what is that?
So you've seen the Birdman rallies.
No.
They're on like a river and they're around the world, but the one at Moomba is huge. They have people who run off the end of a ledge and try and fly. And whoever flies the
and they
longest,
are dressed up like birds and
some
stuff.
are, yeah. Some take it very seriously. Some use it to raise money.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of fun. And Melbourne's Birdman rally is iconic. Just a little, tidbit for your memory bank this weekend. A hang glider pilot named Michael Paul, he's won the event a number of times. He holds the record of 25.5 metres.
That's quite a distance.
It's like for a run up off a ledge, it's pretty good, I reckon.
Yeah, go Michael.
Go Michael.
Monday is a public holiday for Victoria, ACT, Tasmania and South Australia.
Yep.
So all of you get a public holiday. And it's Greenland's general election. Greenland has been in the news a bit thanks to President Trump's interest in it.
Again, a map would be really helpful for this podcast. However, it's very in a really sort of interesting strategic place. So Trump sort of above Europe and across to North America. Trump said that he would like it to be under America's control. It's an autonomous territory of the Kingdom of Denmark. Neither Denmark nor politicians in Greenland have any interest in America stepping in.
Yeah, another issue on the agenda for this election is independence from Denmark, though, as well. The ruling party there has said there'll be a vote on that if it wins the election. I think I need to find like a good listen on Greenland or something. There must be something out there. I'll put that on my list. Back home, NAPLAN starts next week.
From Wednesday. So school kids in years 3, 5, 7 and 9 will start those assessments. There's a bit of a window open to get that testing done. That stays open until the 24th of March. So just 1 o'clock if you've got kids in your life. Also on Wednesday, Simon Holmes A Court is at the Press Club.
Clive Palmer also at the Press Club.
On Thursday.
On Thursday?
Yeah.
So if you want a contrast.
Yes.
That will be quite different speeches, I imagine. But Simon Holmes A Court is the convener of Climate 200, the organisation that supports the Teal candidates. He's been a bit of a kingmaker in that organisation, particularly in the last election, with a record number of those being elected. So we'll hear what he has to say. Then what have we got towards the end of the week? Nothing. We're done.
We're done.
We finish on Thursday.
Yeah, let's just call it a day.
Squiz recommends, Claire, before we finish up, the season 2 of Newsmakers has launched. My interview with Sarah Ferguson, the presenter of ABC's 7:30, is out.
Ooh.
Felt like I did that ages ago, but
Yeah.
and we did talk. I think you and Andrew might have mentioned it last week, perhaps.
Yes.
But she rarely does interviews. She interviews people a lot, but she rarely does interviews. And
Really
she
interesting woman.
Yeah, she is. She's very, very thoughtful on journalism. So if you get a chance, love it if you could give that a listen.
Kate, what are two of my loves?
Potatoes.
Yes.
And chicken. as evidenced by this.
Definitely potatoes. The correct answer is potatoes and newsletters.
Oh,
so,
true, actually. That's a hard question.
Tucker? I do love Tucker. Yeah, we'd put him in the top 5 for sure. Broadsheet is a business that we admire. Of course, Nick Shelton, who you spoke to for Newsmakers.
A year ago now.
I know, it feels like a long time ago. He founded that business about 12 years ago. They have excellent information on their website around the cultural heartbeat of wherever you are, particularly the cities, restaurants, things to go and see, things to go and do. They have also really pushed into cooking. So they have a newsletter that I would encourage you to subscribe to if you like a bit of content on recipes and cooking. We'll put the link to that in the episode notes. I've been subscribed to that for a while and it blows me away each week with the sort of recipes and content that they have.
Okay.
Things like the massaman curry from Chin Chin. They get the recipe for it. It's huge. The one that got me this week and why I'm mentioning it, the subject line, "You've never had roast potatoes like this." And I'm like, I am sold. So
or skeptical.
No, I'm in.
Okay.
Like there's no such thing as a bad potato. So I'm in. The recipe we'll put in that. I'm making it this weekend. I'll report back.
It's masala potato?
Masala potatoes.
Okay.
It looks amazing.
I'll hold you to that next week.
Yep, let's do
All
it.
of those recommendations in your show notes. We also post them to Instagram on a Sunday if that's the easiest way for you to get them. Thank you for listening to Weekly Wrap. We'll be back next week.